never made it home. This is the story of the hour that decided who did and who didn't. On a calm winter night in 2012, the Costa Concordia glided across the Mediterranean like a floating city, carrying more than 4,000 people toward Genoa. 14 decks of restaurants, theaters, and pools revealed just how enormous this modern ocean liner truly was. Inside, families dined together, unaware that this ordinary evening was about to change forever. Below deck, a multilingual crew worked quietly, speaking many languages as they prepared for another routine night. Hours earlier, the ship had left the port of Civitavecchia, turning north toward its planned route along the coast. On the bridge, the captain took personal control, confident and calm as Giglio Island came into view. He suggested passing closer to the island than planned, calling it a traditional salute known as the Incino. Crew recalled an earlier sail by near Giglio when the ship had glided past to cheering residents on shore. Now on January 13, autopilot was switched off and manual steering began for the final approach. As the ship turned toward the island, passengers admired the lights, unaware they were entering dangerous waters. Inside the bridge, officers monitored the course while the captain's attention drifted between navigation and conversation. The helmsman, listening to commands in a second language, hesitated for a crucial moment before responding. The massive hull was now passing far closer to the island than any normal route allowed. Officers exchanged uneasy glances as the turn appeared to be coming far too late. The captain gave a sudden, stronger rudder order, but the helmsman's response came a fraction too slow. Beneath the surface, a jagged reef was closing in fast on the ship's port side. At 9:45 p.m., the hull struck the reef, tearing a long gash along the ship's side. In the theater, performers and audience felt the jolt, some believing it was simply part of the show. In the restaurant, glasses shattered and the lights flickered before the engines fell suddenly silent. In their cabin, one family felt the floor shift beneath them, uncertain what had just happened. On the bridge, a stunned silence followed as officers began to understand the scale of what had occurred. Below deck, seawater was already pouring through the breach into vital machinery spaces. Compartment after compartment began to flood, far beyond what the ship's design could survive. Engineers waded through rising water, desperately trying to reach failing controls. With propulsion gone, the enormous vessel now drifted forward on momentum alone. On the bridge, officers reported the loss of engines and steering, and the captain's expression turned to disbelief. Passengers began to notice the floor was no longer level as the ship slowly started to list. Crew quietly began putting on life jackets, even as reassuring announcements continued. At around 9:55, passengers were told there was only an electrical fault and technicians were working on it. Many stayed at dinner, laughing off their worry and setting their life jackets aside. A few cautious passengers ignored the reassurance and began moving their families toward the upper decks. Below, engineers reported that at least 4 compartments were flooding, reaching the generators. One by one, backup generators failed, and entire sections of the ship went dark. Powerless, the Concordia began drifting broadside, pushed slowly by the wind toward the island. On shore, residents of Giglio noticed the enormous ship moving unnaturally close to their coastline. A crew member quietly called a relative on shore, describing objects falling during dinner. In Livorno, Coast Guard officers received the first uncertain report of a problem aboard. At 10:10 p.m., the Coast Guard called the bridge directly, asking if anything was wrong. The captain told them it was only a blackout, even as his own officers knew the hull had been torn open. Suspicious of the mismatch with earlier reports, Coast Guard staff began quietly preparing for the worst. The ship's list grew more severe as it drifted into the shallow water near Giglio. Beneath the surface, the starboard side struck rocky shallows, grounding the vessel before it could sink further. On the tilting decks above, passengers could now see the island close enough to touch. Crew began uncovering lifeboats, though the formal order to abandon ship had still not been given. A former sailor among the passengers recognized the coded announcement and quietly understood the truth. At 10:54 p.m., more than an hour after impact, the abandoned ship signal finally sounded. Passengers rushed into sloping corridors, carrying children and clutching life jackets as they went. In the restaurant, the floor had become a steep slope, and diners clung to bolted tables just to stay upright. Corridors grew dark, lit only by the pale glow of mobile phones as crew and passengers struggled to communicate. Conflicting directions from crew members sent frightened groups toward different, uncertain stairwells. One family reached a lifeboat station only to find it already full, forcing them to search elsewhere. Crowds pressed toward the remaining lifeboats as crew fought to keep the loading platforms steady. A lifeboat scraped against the tilted hull as it was lowered, its cables straining under the impossible angle. With trained crew overwhelmed, cooks and waiters stepped forward to help operate the lifeboats themselves. On the sloping deck, two strangers supported an elderly passenger, guiding her step by careful step. Parents lifted their child over a railing into a waiting lifeboat, their eyes never leaving her. The ship's tilt grew so extreme that staircases became like walls, forcing people to climb using ropes and rails. Where lifeboats could not reach, passengers climbed down rope ladders toward small rescue boats below. Others jumped from lower decks straight into the cold sea, swimming toward waiting rescuers. From the harbor, Italian Coast Guard and local boats raced out toward the stricken ship. At the dock, rescuers wrapped frightened survivors in blankets and guided them toward the village. Children were led into the local school, while adults sat quietly, still absorbing what had happened. Meanwhile, the captain had already left the ship in a lifeboat, later claiming he had simply fallen into it. Once ashore, he remained on land as rescue operations around him grew more urgent by the minute. At Coast Guard headquarters, Commander Gregorio DeFalco learned the captain had abandoned his ship. By phone, DeFalco ordered him to return aboard immediately and account for everyone still on board. The captain made excuses, staring toward the ship from shore, but did not go back. DeFalco's command grew firmer, but the captain never returned to the vessel he had left behind. On the island, Deputy Mayor Mario Pellegrini chose to board the sinking ship rather than stay ashore. He climbed a swinging rope ladder up the tilted hull into the darkness above. Inside, he searched corridor after corridor, finding frightened passengers but no one in command. Later, in a flooded passage, he and others pulled an exhausted passenger from water rising toward their chests. The final trapped person was pulled to safety as Pellegrini braced himself against the flooded wall. Professional divers and firefighters soon arrived to search the ship's partially submerged interior. They moved carefully through cabins turned almost sideways, listening for any sign of survivors. Overhead, a helicopter hovered above the wreck, lifting a survivor from an exposed upper deck. Rescue crews guided remaining passengers across the nearly vertical hull toward waiting boats below. The elderly passenger helped earlier arrived safely at the harbor, wrapped in a warm blanket. Through the night, boats moved again and again between the ship and the island under searchlights. As dawn broke, the full scale of the disaster was revealed, the ship lying on its side near Giglio. Rescue officials began comparing passenger records, realizing that some people were still unaccounted for. At first light, divers prepared to continue searching the silent, listing wreck. 32 lives had been lost that night, remembered quietly, without names or numbers. Police arrived on the island and took the captain into custody. International media soon filled the Giglio waterfront, turning the disaster into a global story. Investigators boarded the bridge, documenting damaged consoles and the ship's frozen, tilted instruments. Piecing together bridge recordings, they reconstructed the late turn and the confusion that followed. Investigators traced the altered route, showing exactly where it drifted fatally close to the reef. Divers measured the long gash torn into the port side, evidence of the force of impact. Training records revealed that emergency drills had never prepared crew for a ship tilted this severely. Months later, the trial opened in Grosseto as the captain entered a courtroom filled with families and cameras. Prosecutors laid out the chain of decisions, using maps, recordings, and evacuation timelines. In the gallery, survivors and relatives listened quietly, some holding photographs turned away from view. The court delivered its verdict, guilty, with a 16-year sentence for the former captain. An appeal followed, but higher courts ultimately upheld the original conviction. Left behind near Giglio, the massive wreck remained, unstable above a fragile marine environment. Engineers concluded it could not be safely dismantled where it lay, given the fuel and ecological risk. Divers carried out thousands of underwater tasks, attaching cables and building support structures below. Massive underwater platforms were constructed beside the wreck to hold it steady after rotation. Over many months, huge flotation tanks and cable systems were fitted along the exposed hull. In September 2013, engineers began the delicate parbuckling operation to right the ship. Slowly, the straining cables began to move the wreck for the first time since the disaster. Over many hours, the ship rotated gradually upright as water cascaded from its decks. At last, the Concordia settled upright onto its underwater platform, and engineers allowed themselves quiet relief. Workers then attached flotation sponsons to both sides, preparing the wreck to be refloated. In July 2014, the ship slowly rose as water was pumped from the tanks beneath it. Under heavy escort, the damaged vessel was towed across the sea toward Genoa. It arrived at last at the dismantling yard, surrounded by cranes and industrial docks. Piece by piece, workers began the long process of taking the ship apart. Over time, the once massive vessel was reduced until only scattered sections of steel remained. During the salvage, search teams located the final missing victims, handled with quiet respect. The story returns once more to that January night. The illuminated ship turning toward Giglio. In the hour after impact, a misleading announcement, a delayed response, and a worsening list all compounded the danger. A chain of decisions defined that night, a hand on the wheel, a silent radio, a captain stepping onto shore. Yet ordinary people acted with courage, crew, passengers, islanders, divers, and rescuers who did not hesitate. Today's cruise ships are even larger, making clear leadership and evacuation planning more essential than ever. Navigation, communication, training, and leadership only work when people act clearly and act early. Years later, the waters beside Giglio are calm again as boats cross where the wreck once lay. One final time, the story returns to the night of January 13th, 2012, before the fatal turn. 32 points of light appear across the dark water, honoring those who never came home. At dawn, the sea lies calm and still, a quiet reminder that behind every failed machine were human choices.